Welcome to Untitled Guide Service. I'm going to show you how to tie a preacher jig today using an Arky style jig head, short shank, wide gap, heavy hook. First, get it set up in your vise. I like to use super glue. It's my tying media of choice. Put a dab of super glue on the shank. Get your thread. Wrap it down over the tag end. Cut off your tag end. Now doing this, your thread's locked to the jig head. You're ready to start tying. Now the key to a preacher jig is a long bucktail or a synthetic hair. I have a lot of friends that hunt, and basically when they shoot an old mature buck, I have them cut the tail off, and I put canning salt on the actual hide. Flesh out the hide, put canning salt on it, dry it out, and this will last you for about a year, 2 years before it goes too bad on you. Alright, so got the head prepped, we're ready to roll. Select the size hair you want, depending on the size forage you're trying to imitate. So I'm going to take this tuft right here. And you don't want a whole big giant pile. You do about a 1/4 inch to maybe a 1/2 inch pitch. And I tie it in sections. Trim off the edge. Trim off the edge so it's nice and smooth. And we start tying. Roll this back up to the collar. You don't have to be too crazy neat on the first go around. Alright, so I got it started. See how it's kind of thin on certain sections. I'm going to roll it over. Take another pinch of hair. Kind of measure it out, make sure we got it about the same length. Clean up the edges. Do the same process again. Just a couple quick wraps, get it started. Lock it in there. Alright, so that's the beginning step of this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some flash to it. A little attractant. There's a couple of styles I like to use. A crystal flash, or a tinsel flash of sorts. I'm making these for my buddy that's fishing the FLW Coastal Series on Oneida, so there's a lot of shad in there, so I'm going to go with a crystal flash, or a crystal flash, a tinsel flash, something a little bit more eye-catchy. So you want about the same length of the bucktail, or maybe a hair longer, nothing too crazy. Same process as the bucktail. So now you got that flash in there, so when that is doing the dance, it's flashing and it's catching the light. Now we're going to turn it upside down in a second here, but I'm going to add a little bit more bucktail over the top of this. I like to put my flash inside the bucktail, not as opposed to on top. It kind of acts a little differently, gives a little bit different of an action. Looks a little bit more realistic to me. I add a little bit extra color to the top anyways to kind of make it look like a baitfish as opposed to just a straight bucktail. I just broke my thread here, so let me re-thread for a second. So one problem with tying bucktail is you want a heavier gauge thread if you can use it. Where's my fishing line that I usually use to do this? Here we go. I always keep a piece of fishing line on hand. Re-thread my bobbin here. Usually when I tie bucktails, or if I'm going to tie a bunch of them, I'll get Kevlar thread. It's a little stronger, it's flat. Bucktail or deer hair in general tends to be hollow, so if you have the Kevlar thread with the flat sides to it, it tends to tie a little better, a little tighter, makes the hair flare out a little bit more. So I highly suggest that. It's just a little on the pricey side. Not a lot of places carry it, so it's hard to find at times. Because I started this with the new thread wrap, I'll put a little more dab of super glue on there just to kind of lock everything together. Alright, So now we're kind of getting the size, the bulk we want. I'm going to add a little bit more to both sides and a little bit more to the back. A little touch of color on the top, and this jig will be done. Yes, it's a little bit of a process to do this, but it's well worth your time. And if you've ever fished a preacher jig, you know they're a whole lot of fun when it comes to offshore schooling fish. You know, a lot of people might think this is just a, you know, southern reservoir thing, but big smallmouth in Lake Ontario, any of the largemouth local lakes in New York, Rochester, New York, that have shad populations in them, they'll eat these. It's not a southern reservoir thing by any means, strictly. Gets a little messy when you're cutting your bucktails up, so be prepared to clean up afterwards so your wife or girlfriend doesn't yell at you. Alright. Alright, so that's the main body of the preacher jig that we're tying here today. It's got the flash down the center, white around the entire thing. Now, I'm going to put a little color to the top portion of this to make it look a little bit more like a shad. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to add a little moss green to the top here. Kind of give it that Tennessee shad, natural herring look. You don't need a lot, just enough. That'll be perfect. Alright, now we're just going to finish tying this up here, get it all wrapped up. As you can see, it takes quite a few turns to get that evenly covered. You don't want any extra hair sticking out. I like when I tie my jigs for bass, trout, pike, whatever I'm tying them for, I like them nice and clean looking, professional looking. There's no reason to be very sloppy with your stuff. Alright, now that's my Tennessee shad style preacher jig. Little moss green cap, white body with some center flash. When you give that thing this, start stroking it in the water column, dragging it, yo-yoing it, however you choose to fish it. It's going to have a real nice fluid motion to it, nice long fur. If you think they're on a smaller size bait, you can always trim the tail down a little bit. Alright, so since we got everything all wrapped up here, we're going to do the finishing steps. I just do a couple of half turns here. You can do whatever knot you want to finish it. I highly suggest super glue. It holds extremely well, and what I do is I just coat the thread heavily. I let it soak right down into the fur and through the thread. It locks my knots up. And then I just make sure I go all the way around the collar. And that's your preacher jig. So when I'm making these, I'll let them dry like this. So if there's any excess super glue, it rolls down the head, doesn't roll up onto the skirt. And that's it. Look me up on Facebook, Alex Cody Guide Service. Remember, keep your lines tight and hook sets are free.